Hi, everyone. I'm Tish Conlon. Here's another episode of Tish Talk. Welcome. I hope everyone's having a good day. Today, I have back someone who is a wealth of knowledge. She's been a freedom fighter, involved in the movement for some time. Chris Weisdorf has been an advisor for many years and a financial advisor for over 20. He's lectured on a range of topics, including the digital ID and insurance, crypto, and security issues. He's led he's been involved in a number of legal challenges, I know, with the City of Toronto personally, and has been involved, has an incredible knowledge of our legal system, and has been an advisor to some fairly prominent cases, including Adams Skelly, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and the Adamson barbecue legal challenges during the lockdowns. He's been strongly against the mandates and lockdowns, and we're happy to have him with us here in Canada. And today we're going to talk about not only the provincial election, the results, and what that might mean. Chris has some great insight, but also some of the bills that are coming out that you may or may not be aware of, that are a little concerning, and how you can push back. And he's also going to educate us a little bit. I didn't even know myself, so this is interesting. So how bills move through from Senate and House of Commons, right, Chris? And give us sort of some basic learning, education. This is good stuff for us to learn in the system, how it's not working in Canada, and some of the things we can do to change it. And then just other thoughts on what's happening right now. Have I covered it, Chris? That's a lot for you to cover. Hopefully not too much today. First of all, how are you doing? And what do you think of the results of the provincial election?
Well, I'm fine. Other people are not, who we know. We know
Yes.
people who have run. We know people who have thrown their support before these people ran, and then when they ran, they really got out there, knocked on doors, and spent money and donated. And a lot of money was raised, especially for the Ontario Party. I mean, way more than Maxime Bernier ran when he ran in 2019. He raised nationally far less than the Ontario Party just raised in a very short amount of time, because how long did that go on for? The campaign, and before the campaign they were raising money, and it was far less than what the Ontario Party raised. So I mean, that was a smashing success in terms of the money raised, but I mean, in terms of mobilizing the vote, getting the percentage of people who voted, I calculated the percentage of people who voted. In fact, I should look right now while I'm talking to you, because I know the numbers. The numbers are something like, I think it was 120,000. Let's say 124,000. Yes. I think it is.
New Blue.
Plus, what is it? 84,000. Divided by approximately 6 million voters in Ontario. There's nearly 15 million people, but there's about 6 million registered voters. That's less than 3.5%. So as 3.5% of the electorate turned out and voted for the Ontario and Ontario Party and the New Blue Party.
New Blue.
So that's less than 3.5%, and that, compared to the PPC numbers, which back in 2019 were roughly 2%. 2 years later, that number became about 7 to 7.5%, depending on where you were. I don't know what it was nationally, but it was around 7%. So that was more than triple the vote, and that's a huge gain.
Yes.
And then 2 months after that election was held, and this is January, February. So about 2 months later, that number from about 7% jumped to 14 to 15%.
That's incredible.
I mean, it's exponential growth. And so if you have 14 to 15%, and then in Ontario, which is the most populous province, you're only pulling less than 3.5%, there's a massive disconnect.
Yes.
And no matter how you look at it, regardless of how much money was raised, the parties, even if they combined, and I would argue if they combined, there was no competition, there was cooperation, I would argue they would get far more than 3.5%.
Yes,
But
I think
but
so
but
too.
but the
Yes,
3.5% that they did get is what is it, a quarter? It's roughly a quarter of what the numbers were very recently for the People's Party of Canada. So
yes,
irrespective of what you think about each party and reading all the platforms, and sadly very few people actually read stuff these days. That's why we are where we are 27 months later. No one in the media reads stuff. Politicians read stuff, don't read stuff.
right.
The doctors and lawyers don't read stuff. No one seems to read anything. So people don't read platforms. They don't read the constitution of the New Blue and Ontario parties or the PPC. They certainly
Right.
don't read the actual platforms either. And that's a problem. I've read everything, but no one else seems to read it.
Yes, you're right. And I know we've had conversations about this. I know some of my audience is new to some of these podcasts, or maybe doesn't know about even these parties and what they represent. A lot of times the media has just slanted them extreme, which is actually the absolute opposite, because some of these newer parties are more moderate. They're actually just looking for accountable government and following our constitutional law, respecting our freedoms and rights. So that's really about as moderate as you can get. And what's happened is we've had kind of a really fundamental shift to the left. Even all of the uniparties, I call them, doesn't matter if it's liberal, conservative, or NDP. So what for new people here, some of these new parties, the reason they're coming in is because we're getting away from following our constitutional law and our democracy, and from being a democracy. When you're shifting censorship, we're going to talk about some of these bills. And I know one of the things you and I talked about, and which is very important to me, is making sure that we learn lessons from this election. Not only did the candidates from New Blue and Ontario Party not regain their seats, so we have no one representing the more moderate view. And we had a lot of infighting. People who are aware of what's happening with our government wanted them to unite, and they didn't. I really don't want this to happen federally, and I hope that the message is received, because we can't have PPC and another national party with a similar platform fighting it out when most people aren't even, as you said, reading the paper or following platforms. They're just going with the old story, and we need to have one shift towards a moderate government. And PPC is not an extreme right. They're a middle of the road following constitutional law. So I hope that doesn't happen. I hope the message is received. Will it be? I don't know, but I'm going to do everything I can to help facilitate that. And I know you will as well. And hopefully everyone listening will strongly speak about the importance of not doing that. It's a destructive action. It's not going to help us get anywhere. But anyways, let's just dive into.
Well, yeah, I should just comment on that, which is this. The way that human beings operate and have operated for not just thousands of years, but tens of thousands of years, is we are tribal. We realized a long time ago, I mean, if we don't band together, we're going to be at the mercy of the elements. We're either going to be looking for dinner or being chased for someone else's dinner.
Yes.
And so we really needed to kind of combine resources, and we became hunter gatherers. Eventually the agricultural revolution happened about 10,000 years ago. All of that was driven by, just tribes of people, groups of people protecting their own interests. And so that's carried on over, thousands of years, many centuries to today. Why do people join a church? Why do people continue to give to a church? They have a congregation. It's because of habit. It's because of those fundamental instincts. Why do people give money to different causes? Why do people join a political party? Why do people support the party system, which is basically completely excludes competition? If you had the party system in terms of cars, or in terms of any product or service, the government would come after you for violating antitrust laws, for violating the Competition Act in Canada. Yet that is precisely how things operate politically. And this goes back to this ancient instinct. And the system is not broken. It operates precisely how they want it to operate. We have first past the post system in Canada.
What does that mean for those who aren't aware? Just if you can, I don't know if you can quickly explain.
Yeah,
what that means.
it's first past the post means that whoever gets the most amount of votes wins. In other countries, they also have, in many other countries, they have a first past the post system, but they have a runoff. So let's say they have 3 candidates and one gets more than the others, but they don't get over 50% of the vote. They don't get a majority. They'll have a runoff. Essentially, another ballot will be taken to see who, and of course they do this in party leadership races, but they don't do it federally or provincially. We don't have runoffs in Canada. So if you have Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, and you have the Conservatives get 34%, Liberals get 33%, NDP gets 33%. The 34% is winner takes all. They take everything.
I see.
And if only 50% show up to vote, literally 17% controls 83% of the population. Justin Trudeau got, I think, 5.5 million votes in the last election. There's 38 million people in Canada. He controls 32.5 million people in Canada.
Wow, that doesn't seem right.
It is not. It isn't right. However, that is the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is first past the post. We have a British parliamentary system where if you do not vote with the party in power, you will be kicked out of caucus. They don't have that in the United States. They have that in other countries. They have that in Britain. You will be departed. If you get departed, as I said about earlier, about having people who have, just provide, they give regularly, they hang out regularly in political settings. It's habit. So if you don't have the party behind you, you don't have all those people habitually providing to the party and to you, when you are essentially abandoned by the group, by the party, just like you would be abandoned in the wilderness, 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, whatever, or excommunicated by the church a few hundred years ago, you would be ostracized. You would be obliterated. So that's what they do today. If you don't vote with the party, and if you do not pull that vote, then you have no chance of succeeding. And if you split the vote in some way, meaning if another party has the same types of views as you do, and you do not cooperate, you will split your own vote, and you will cancel each other out. I should mention one other analogy, very important analogy, which is it's the Cold War analogy. It's the game theory analogy, and it is the mutually assured destruction analogy. And essentially, there was one guy, you've probably seen the movie A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, and
Yes.
The guy, it was about John Nash. He won the Nobel Prize. He was a mathematician. He won the Nobel Prize for economics. And he won it because not in spite of, but because of his paranoid schizophrenia. He came up with game theory. Game theory is very popular these days. Back then it was very new. And so there's something called the prisoner's dilemma. Everyone's heard of that, where you have two prisoners, one in one interview room, another one in another interview room. They don't know what each of them is going to say. So if they both, if one of them turns the other one in, then if one turns the other one in, one stays silent, the other guy screws the other guy. So one says nothing, one screws the other guy. The one who screws the other guy gets off. The guy who gets screwed gets the max amount of prison. If they both screw each other, they get, I think, 5 years instead of 10 years in prison. If they both say nothing, they get, I think, 1 or 2 years in prison, the least amount of time. So the best course of action there is, unbeknownst to them, for them to say nothing, to essentially cooperate with one another. John Nash won the Nobel Prize because he thought up a game, as I said, based on his paranoid schizophrenia, which itself was premised on two powers hell-bent on their mutual destruction. So, one against the other. In this case, it was the United States versus the Soviet Union. And his game, and I'll just put it right out there, you might have to bleep it, was called "Fuck You, Buddy."
Oh, yeah.
And essentially this game, because of his paranoid schizophrenia, he thought like you have to screw the other party as much as possible. But the game theory broke down. This game broke down when there was cooperation. So the whole thing here is a very important lesson to be learned. If
Yes,
you
let's,
have, if you compete with one another in a first past the party system, in a system which is first past the post system, and you have a party system, and you have a British parliamentary system as we have in this country, if you don't have the party behind you because you didn't support the party and you were departied, you were kicked to the back benches, and you then, through association with someone else, you form a political party, and then your own people decide, you know what, we're gonna actually form a competing political party. You are feeding right into what I just said: mutually assured destruction by vote.
are
Yes.
you referring to the fact that there were two parties with some, like the New Blue?
And they're
And
the same.
everybody, yeah, they're the
People are
same,
trying
yeah, and
to
I
find
agree. That
differences.
was so destructive
Yes.
to, even to balancing out our government, to having these more moderate platforms instead
Yeah.
of everything to the left. They would have kind of balanced things out. Yeah, so competing against each other was, yeah, absolutely.
It's
And I
mutually
feel
assured
bad.
destruction.
Absolutely. And look at all the effort and the money that went in, all lost. And if we were
Yes.
to repeat that, that's the definition of insanity,
It
repeating
is
that
the
federally.
definition of insanity. It did
And I,
not work. I think this was an important experiment to be tried, because the PPC has gained exponentially in terms of its, in a very in
yes.
less than about 2.5 years.
Well, they're standing up for
Yeah.
constitutional rights and no one else is. That's, that's
They're the
moderate.
only ones. So you
Yeah.
have to bide your time in politics. I mean, let's say if Bernier ended up getting 20 or 30 candidates in the next election, whenever the hell that's going to be, but he ends up with that many candidates, it'll be the fastest growing and most successful political party since this country was founded, other than the Liberals running things for 95% of the time since July 1st, 1867.
Is that how much they've been in power? 90?
The
90% or?
Liberal Party of Canada came into existence the very same day that the Canada came into existence, which is July 1st, 1867. Over that period of time, I mean, up until Diefenbaker came in, I mean, the Liberals had almost every government in Canadian history.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that
Then
much.
Diefenbaker got a minority. People made a big deal about Diefenbaker's minority. When Mulroney got one minority government, I mean, that was unprecedented. When he got two in a row, it was incredible. When Harper did the same thing eventually later, he was in power for 10 years. It was incredible. So that's changed things somewhat, but nevertheless, the Liberals up until 1984 were in power for virtually the entirety of Canada's existence. And the Liberal Party of Canada used to be the Libertarian Party of Canada. I mean, you look at Wilfrid Laurier, he said freedom is our nationality, right? They believed that back then. They truly believed it.
The opposite now. I mean, the Liberal Party is
completely.
is proposing censorship, and they're breaching our freedoms. They're breaching the Constitution. Look at all these bills coming out. It's the exact opposite. Right. It's PPC and some conservatives, I give them credit, are the only ones standing up for our constitutional rights and freedoms and democracy and opposing censorship and put, the common sense of freedom of speech. Doesn't matter if we don't agree, we need to be able to debate and not unfriend each other and not cancel each other. Yeah, it's disturbing. Well, let's dive into some of these bills that are being implemented. I know you talked about, now this is something even I ran in the federal election. I'm learning, and you're so knowledgeable. I mean, some of the bills have a C in front of them, some of them have an S, and you're saying that they have to go through the Senate and the House of Commons. So if it's an S in front, it's starting in the Senate. Can you go both ways, start in the Senate and go?
Yeah, it's easy to understand. It just has to be explained very quickly to people. And I've been asked to kind of teach a bit of a civics class on how things work. We never learned this in school. In the United States, apparently they do, but not in this country. So people, it's not complicated. Essentially, you have two houses. This is the case in the United States. It's the case in Canada. It's in the case in a lot of countries. In some states, it's the case. In Canada, generally, I don't think we have anything other than legislatures in Canada. We don't have an upper house in the provinces. In the United States, some states do, some states don't. So in Canada, federally, you have two chambers. You have the lower house, the House of Commons, and you have the upper house, the Senate. In Canada, we elect our representatives. The senators are appointed. That's the British parliamentary system. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I know a lot of people have said it's a bad thing, and they want elected judges. They want, as if electing anything is going to change the system. I mean, appointees have become more and more politicized very recently, but previous to this time, judges were generally selected. I know people say the opposite. They have no idea what they're talking about. Judges were selected on certainly a patronage basis, but if you actually look at those decisions that the Supreme Court justices made, a lot of times it went against the party that put them in.
That's good
on
to
the
hear.
bench.
So they're not
People have
biased.
no idea. Karakatsanis and Moldaver, who were appointed by Harper, immediately went against the Harper government when they tried to
Okay.
weaken
Well,
search and seizure rights.
that's fair. Yeah, so that is
So
fair.
in the United
Yeah.
States, it's exactly the opposite. They elect people or whatever. Essentially, they're confirmed by the
Right.
House and the Senate, and then they're put onto the bench for life. In Canada, you have to retire at 75. That's another good thing about our system. People continually bash our system. There's a lot of good
That's
things
good.
about it.
That's good. So
Yes. So I'll say this. So with respect to our political system, you have an upper house and you have a lower house. Something that originates in the Senate, it can originate in the Senate or the House of Commons.
okay.
Something that originates in the Senate can then go through the Senate. It has to go through 2 readings, committee, 3rd reading, then it goes to the House. After that, goes 2 readings, committee, 3rd reading, it becomes law. Similarly, it can originate in the House of Commons.
And who
then
votes
it goes
on
through
it?
the House, and it does the same thing. It has to go through both houses. It has to go through both committees, or whatever committee is the appropriate committee. So it has to do that. And the other thing is the number on the bill. If it's a high number, if it's like 200 plus, it is a private member's bill. If it's a low number, it's a government bill. So the private members' bills are less likely to become law, especially in the Senate. It could take many years for it to become law. Many times it doesn't even become law. It's just there to provoke a discussion. People don't understand that. So
that's good to hear, because some of these high number bills you were telling me about are quite concerning.
Very.
Extremely.
So just to be clear, there's 2 houses. There's the House and the Senate, and something that originates in one has to go through both. I know there's been a lot of misinformation on this, including from some very well-known people.
Yeah, and I never knew myself. And is it the same provincially, the same setup?
No, as I said, we just have legislatures. So if something goes through 2 readings, committee, 3rd reading, just like Bill 100 was rammed through, which we lobbied against, it becomes law right away. Yes.
So in a way,
there's no Senate in Ontario. Yeah.
So in a way, the provincial governments have more power.
They had both legislatively and also judicially. With respect to what the Supreme Court has ruled, and even there was something higher than the Supreme Court called the Judicial Committee, the Privy Council in Britain. Because we're a British colony and we were not independent until 1982. From 1867 until 1982, we were not independent until about 1949. The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council superseded the Supreme Court. So what does the Crown not want? The Crown does not want breakaway colonies. The Crown does not want revolutions against the Crown. So every time the federal government, even though our Constitution wants, and the founders, the founding fathers, the fathers of Confederacy, well, they didn't write the Constitution, but they were the ones who were there pounding the table on Confederacy for Canada, and having the 1867 British North America Act, Constitution Act in 1867, what they did was they wanted a strong federal government and weak provinces. But the Crown and the Judicial Committee, the Privy Council, didn't quite see it that way. And they over a long period of time, they weakened the federal government and strengthened the provinces. So because it's much harder to foment a revolution with provinces than it is with a strong federal government. In the United States, the founding fathers wanted precisely the opposite. They wanted strong states and a weak federal government. They got what our founding fathers wanted. They got a very strong, all-powerful federal government and relatively weak states. So in
Jesus.
Canada, the provinces, they want the provinces to be able to ram through legislation. They want the provinces to compete with the federal government and beat the federal government. That's how things have been for a long time. And if
Yes.
you look at the pandemic response, whatever you want to call it, all the restrictions, the vast majority of the restrictions are at the provincial level. Yeah, we have these travel restrictions, but all the lockdowns and everything else, all the vaccinations, all that sort of stuff, that was done at the provincial level.
Interesting. That is fascinating. So
Yeah.
we've got, okay, so let's just,
And then the bills. Yeah.
yeah, so let's go through that, and that's going to be a lot for today. I
Yes.
mean, these, I'm just going to list some of them that people may or may not be aware of.
Sure.
And again, for all my viewers out there in the audience, you don't have to agree with me. Let's just take it in and let's be civil, have these discussions. Let's be aware and knowledgeable. Chris, you have so much knowledge. I mean, your memory is incredible.
Thank you.
Just I'm so impressed all the time with your wealth of knowledge. So C-11 is at a federal level, and sort of House of Commons is around censorship. We've got C-21, which is a gun bill for both sides. People, lawful gun owners.
Pretty much a complete gun ban. They don't want
Yeah.
anything. They said they banned they got rid of the long gun registry, which is a complete fiasco. But the whole thing now is the bill C-21 would essentially create a de facto long gun registry, because it bans anything. Like right now, you don't have to register a long gun. So if you buy it off of someone, not a gun store, you don't have to register it. You can just, there's just a certain way you have to hold it, but you don't have, the government doesn't know about it. Now they will, because it will be illegal. I don't know how easy it will be to enforce, but it will be illegal. Handguns, on the other hand, will be completely illegal. They're going to even ban airsoft guns. So these are sort of semi-realistic guns. Some of them look very realistic, but the point is they shoot BBs, they shoot pellets. Those are going to be illegal too. That's going to decimate the industry here. It's funny that Canada produces a lot of weapons that they're very happy to sell to the Ukraine and other countries where they don't want our own people to have them. So, and these are for lawful gun owners. You look at what happened in Texas, who essentially aided and abetted in the massacre, the police there. I'm just going to say it outright. The police aided and abetted the massacre. They were too afraid of getting shot than protecting children over there.
Isn't
If
that
you have the
so
government, if you have it the government's way, they literally cuffed parents who wanted to protect their own children, who were well armed, and they said, can we go in there and actually save our children? And they said no. They weren't going in, and they seemingly want more government power, more police power, and completely decimated power of the citizens to take care of their own affairs and protect their own families. And I'm sorry, just like what you had in the Bataclan massacre in France, which was an absolute nightmare, depending on what you believe really happened there. There's reports of mutilations and horrible things there. We don't know if that happened or not. The point is, they walked in with 3 machine guns. They took over the entire theater and massacred people in there. It is a massacre. If they had any guns, if one person had a gun, concealed carry, none of that would have happened. The only, when seconds count, the cops are minutes away, and it's unfortunate. And it took hours for a response there. They waited for what, 40 minutes to go into the classroom.
It's unconscionable. Someone needs to be held accountable. I believe in legal gun ownership. I'm not in, there's some of the things about the illegal gun trade that are being allowed to happen. So illegal gun ownership, but lawful gun owners, and the whole story in the States, I didn't want to dwell on, but it was so fishy how this young kid who's apparently being watched for
they're all watched. They're always known about. Always known about.
And he was given all of this high-end stuff, and nothing. There was no red flags anywhere all along.
No, of course not.
So very, very disconcerting, very fishy. The other thing is, I know I've listened to a number of people speak. I mean, I really believe that the founding fathers in the U.S. knew what they were doing, protecting the Second Amendment, threats from within, without. And I have a number of people I know, the nicest, kindest people, and lawful gun owners that have had to save people or threats have, you know, having a lawful gun has been very helpful for them. Now, I
Right.
don't know what's going to happen in Canada. Is this already been pushed through? Where are we at in that bill? And then let's move
No.
on to censorship.
Yes, no, these things have not become law yet. They want to ram them through. They say they're going to ram them through. They have this agreement. It's a minority government. It is literally a dictatorship. I mean, when you have a minority government, you can't automatically form some sort of coalition with another party and become a majority government for as many years as you want. Sorry, that's not how democracy works in this country. But it's being
That's what they're
redefined.
doing. But
That's
that's
what
what they're
they've done.
doing
They've done it already, and so
with NDP. Yes.
they've done it already. So essentially, when we have the next election, the NDP will cease to exist as a party, just like the Liberal Party is not a party after the last election in 2018, and still remains not a party. The leader of the Liberal Party did not get elected before. He failed to get elected in this election. So they are nowhere. The Liberal Party still get 24-25% of the vote. I think it was in this election. They failed. They got 8 seats. So they have no
Yes.
chance. So they will stay. They're not a party. They've lost official party status. They've not regained it. The NDP here, they lost 10 seats. They were decimated. Federally, I don't see why anyone would vote NDP when, you know, they're
He
just
never
going
stood up for the workers.
they're just
He
going to
didn't.
do what another political party wants and give them absolute power. So why would you vote for the NDP? The vote, and unfortunately, this ties into everything I was talking about before about human nature and about something called demoralization. If you keep the population demoralized, and you leave them with the sense that they're ineffectual, that they are powerless, why bother? Why show up to vote? Why protest? Why do anything? We already know that we're going to lose. Now that's a loser mentality. So
exactly. We must fight against that at all costs.
Continually.
Always believe every action that every person takes is meaningful and
that's why we are where we are, because most people have sat on their hands for the election because they're thoroughly demoralized. Yuri Bezmenov, ex-KGB agent, you know, in 1984 he did an interview. You should look this up. The 4 stages. Literally type this into YouTube. It's still on YouTube. Surprisingly, they tried banning it over the years, but it's called the 4 stage.
Oh, you've just frozen for a minute for the audience, so we'll just wait.
Stages of logical subversion. It's 7 minutes of clips from his 80-minute interview in 1984. He says that he says I cut out here, but there's 4 stages, and the first stage is demoralization. It takes 15 to 20 years. At least he said it didn't. Taken far longer, 15 to 20 years. This next stage is destabilization that could take 2 to 5 years. Then there's crisis that takes a few weeks or months, and then there's normalization. He said all of this in 1984. Okay,
Wow.
so what have we had? What did we have in 2020? We had all those things crammed into the period of maybe 1 or 2 months.
And people are exhausted. They're sick of it all. They're sick of it.
But I'm sorry, we're in a war, and you can't. Yeah, people complain about things being inconvenient. I say get a de-Googled Android phone. I'm in the de-Googled Android phone business. I say you don't have to get one from us, but get one, because if you don't get one, you will be subject to the digital ID. It's the only way you can fight back. Either that or have no cell phone. And they go, well, I'll have to have 2 cell phones then, because my husband and kids and all that, they won't switch and all that. And that's inconvenient. I know my answer is war is inconvenient. You might have to carry 2 digital devices to save your ass. You might have to get gold, silver, platinum. You might have to get guns, etc.,
Well,
I would say legally, but nevertheless,
I mean, a lot of conservative business people are listening. There's a lot of them are conservatives. They're not really following the news. There's people who are just kind of thinking about this. I mean, when you refer to war, we're really trying to get our government back to respecting people's freedoms and rights, and building the country in a way that like opening our resource sector, allowing people to make their own medical decisions, and a number of other things.
And the death of collective rights, please. The entire legal system revolves around individual rights, whether it's the Human Rights Code or the Charter or the
Yes.
privacy legislation or informed consent laws, or even decisions rendered by the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal here. The fact of the matter is we have individual rights, not collective rights. And I read the Constitution for the Ontario Party, and it literally says collective rights. Like it says
Oh,
community or
that's no good.
whatever. And
Yeah.
then later on, it says individual rights. He says we believe very strongly in property rights. At the same time, they want to completely ban foreign ownership of homes, which is the most, in terms of the sanctity of private property. I mean, that's the top. So, I mean, you can't. It's like saying I'm a vegan, but I eat meat on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You can't do that. It's ideologically
That's funny.
impure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes no sense. And this is why we have to get rid of this. It doesn't matter what political party you're from. We have to get rid of this notion, and it's infected people, is collectivism and collective rights.
Yes.
I told people in unions, you got to get rid of this mentality because it is destroying our democracy.
Well, you know what, and that's just another topic unto itself. But this is what they're teaching in schools. So people are afraid, maybe going back to what you said about human nature, and they're preying on this really with everything they do.
Yes.
Is now kids are afraid to disagree in school. I grew up in school where we had debate clubs. They don't have debate clubs anymore.
No, they don't, because you'll trigger someone. Yeah.
They don't want people to be critical thinkers. They want everyone to just go along with what's being fed to them, agree nicely, and anyone who disagrees is actually stared at, frowned upon. It's actually a total indoctrination center. And I remember as a kid you were allowed to disagree. Now you're not. And people disagree quietly or not at all. That's quietly meaning they think it themselves, or they might say it to their friend. So this education reform is critical. But yeah, some of these other bills, and maybe we won't have time to go into all of them. Bill 100, which is already passed, which is deeply concerning, particularly if you're a peaceful protester in Ontario, and they can seize your property. There's no due course with you're basically considered guilty just for peaceful as being
guilty until proven innocent, and in many cases can't even be proven innocent.
Exactly. And I mean, and now we have Bill 2, you said S-233 and C-233 coming out as well.
Those are, I think people are spending too much time on those bills. That's another problem that I see, is they've come at us with so many different bills, and now with Ford getting another like 4 or 5 years of absolute power. I mean, it's a super majority. It has about 75% of the seats in the legislature. There's no reason for them to back down. It's for them to be, I mean, it's when George Bush said, when he won his second election, he said, "I've earned political capital and I intend to spend it." Well, Doug Ford should say the same thing. He's gained absolute power. Why won't he use it? Why would he suddenly back down? So the problem there is, Bill 100, I mean, get ready, look out. They're just warming up, right? On Reopening Ontario Act, Bill 100, they can just do whatever the hell they want, and they don't care. They haven't been challenged. We're the only challenge to the Reopening Ontario Act. No one else has challenged it. Belinda Carvalho's is no longer in office. Rick Nichols was the only one who stood up in the last debate, because no one else, they were all shut out. And he read my open letter, and then in that last debate, it wasn't even a debate. It was just a quick vote, essentially. And he was the only one who spoke up at all, because he was the only one who knew about it. They made sure everyone else didn't know about it. They did it at nighttime. It was like past 8 o'clock. I think it was April 13th. So the whole thing is, that's not a democracy. That is shutting out debate. They continually shut down debate. They won't allow people to ask questions. They won't allow people to be questioned, including in the whole gun commission inquiry in Nova Scotia. They will not allow people to be cross-examined. They will not allow any medical officers of health to be cross-examined. They will not allow chief medical officers of health to be cross-examined, or the chief medical officers of health for the Public Health Agency of Canada, which is Teresa Tino. They will not allow any of them to be questioned, to be under oath, to be isolated, and to be forced to answer for what they've done. They will not allow them to be questioned whatsoever.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's a lot to take in here. I mean, we want to leave people.
Well, I should just mention the other bills very quickly. So one of the problems I just said is it's an onslaught, right? We have Bill C-11, we have C-21. So 11 is the censorship bill. You won't be able to do anything in Canada with respect to online without the government looking over your shoulder. Then there's and you could face heavy penalties, and again, you're guilty until proven innocent there, because it's an administrative penalty system. Then there's Bill C-21, that's essentially a complete gun ban. Then there's the Senate bills. There's Bill S-7, which is it's the electronic search and seizure bill. It gives the border guards virtual unlimited power to search and seize electronic devices or whatever, to copy whatever is on those electronic devices. That's a right you will not have. And finally, some senators are speaking up against that. I'm shocked. I'm absolutely completely shocked. That's very new. Over the last few days, people have spoken out about that bill. And then there's Bill S-210, which is a resurrection of Bill S-203 from the previous Parliament. It's an online access bill, which would require that children, be protected against pornography. How do they do that? By having a minimum age requirement. So the minimum age requirement would be established through some sort of identity. And here's the thing: they keep saying, "Oh, it's not a censorship bill. It's not a censorship bill," and they're right. It isn't. What it is a digital ID bill. No one is aware of this bill. It was in S-203 in the last Senate. It's before committee right now. It didn't make it to committee last time, so it can easily pass the Senate if it gets through committee, go through third reading, and then get into the House and be rammed through. And the next thing you know, you will not be able to access the internet without a digital
That
ID.
is so bad. And they have,
and of course, no one's talking about that. I'm the only one.
And they have them titled, it's all this, it's a title. They think, oh, isn't that a good thing? But really what they want to do is something completely different. If you're not paying attention, opening Ontario sounds like, well, that sounds like a wonderful thing that's going to be helpful for everyone. But the hidden agenda is always very dark, and it's always a breach of our rights and freedoms. I know. True. It's concerning. I mean, there's a lot more. What can people do? I mean, can you
I would say the most important thing is to show up, to speak up, to open up.
Don't be afraid to speak out.
Never. This is the problem. People go, well, there's no restrictions now, and we already know, like, the protests haven't made a difference. People,
they do make a difference.
People have no idea. If you look at, and I've studied totalitarian regimes, you can study, I really encourage people to look at totalitarian regimes and see what they thought of protests. Communist China is absolutely terrified of protests. They were terrified of Tiananmen, terrified of everything. They cannot stand open dissent at all. So people go, well, okay, so what? Well, look at all the protesting we did. What fat load of good that it's done here. It's worked in other countries, but it hasn't worked in Canada. Here's the thing. That's like saying, I've spent 1 or 2 years in the gym, and I still have a belly, and my doctor said I gotta exercise if I have a heart attack, whatever. And I haven't lost weight. I don't know. I don't feel much different. Well, the thing is, if you didn't work out, if you didn't go into the gym, if you didn't watch your diet, you would have had the damn heart attack.
Exactly.
If you didn't have protests, our country would have had a serious heart attack. We would have total tyranny.
Absolutely.
The police would be emboldened.
Heroes.
You would not be able to do anything. So thank God people went out there as completely disorganized as they were, and doing it the absolute worst time of the year. Horrible. They should have why not do it in nice weather? We had plenty of opportunities. Why not have 500,000 people in the streets in the summertime on July 1st? Why not do that? No. We have to do it in the coldest time of the year, where we could be choked out with firewood and fuel and everything else. So the point is, people did show up. They did speak up. They did open up. We need that again. We need that. We need to right now come out and do that. The people have to engage in any process they know. If it's protesting, that's one way. If it's letter writing, if it's absolutely banging on the doors of your MPs and MPPs, which you're allowed to do again now. You can't do it federally, but you can do it provincially. So they've lifted restrictions provincially. Federally, with Parliament Hill, you still have to wear a mask. You have proof of double vaccination and all that. But provincially, you can. And people have to engage.
And the other thing is at home, instead of saying, oh, I don't, I'm not, let's not talk about politics, keep politics out of it. No, we need to keep politics in it. Maybe we call it, let's have a conversation what's happening in our community, in our province, in our country. What do
Yes.
you think? I disagree. I disagree. Okay, how could we do better? People have to start, like, have you listened to the bills? Have you looked at the bills? What's happening in the schools? Ask your child. There's a new principal. What does he stand for, or she? Get involved in every area. I'm on the, I've sat in with some of the school parent counselor meetings lately, and I don't like a lot of the things they say, but I'm trying to change from within as well as from without. I
Mhm.
mean, all of these things count. I mean,
It does. It absolutely counts.
yeah,
Citizen engagement. If people stay invisible and they stay silent, silence is compliance. If they keep doing
silence
that,
is,
if
yeah,
people keep doing that, people are too afraid. I mean, what are they afraid of? What are they afraid of? Back in Nazi Germany, 1934, they had Night of the Long Knives, where people were thrown into Dachau. There's the first camp. People were it was before it was a concentration camp, but 3 people were thrown in there. The brown shirts would beat the crap out of anyone who disagreed with the Nazi regime. What do you have to fear now? You might lose your job. Are you kidding me? This is a war. If you do not stand up and risk something, I've risked everything.
yeah, I
I've
have
risked everything.
too.
I fought the city of Toronto. I was out 10 grand on that challenge. I fought that myself. No one would help me. So
Right.
the fact is, I stood up for democracy. It's precious. In the past, if you read what happened in 1775 on Christmas, people were marching through absolutely bitter cold weather. Their bloodied feet. I mean, boots. It's not like you go down and to a shoe store and
Mhm.
buy a nice pair of boots and shoes. They had nothing, and what they did to fight for democracy was something to behold. What do we do now? People aren't even willing to risk anything, and then later on you lose everything. Oops! Then it takes 10 times the effort, 10 times the money, and 10 times the amount of the actual time expended to roll back whatever tyranny has been imposed. That's why you fight for it,
Right.
because if you do not fight for it, you lie down for it, there's no way of getting it back. I mean, it took 72 years for the Soviet Union to collapse. How long will this take to collapse? I really wonder, when will it all end?
Well,
So
big
what
questions.
what
Big, big,
people
big.
can do
Yes.
is, and I want to tell people, do not be afraid. Do not let them scare you. Do not let them into your head. I literally had a friend and business partner call me at 2:30 a.m. in a cold sweat panic about
Yes.
what happened with I guess it was the same time. It was the gun restrictions, and I'm trying to remember. It was all coordinated the
Yes.
same day. It was all coordinated to terrify people. And he said, well, what should I do? And I said, first of all, don't be afraid. Because if you give them that fear, if you give fear, uncertainty, doubt, anxiety, and confusion, it's a sandwich. The fear and confusion causes everything else. If you
You're
allow that into your
paralyzed
head,
too.
it paralyzes you as well. It causes a state of paralysis so that you will not act. You'll think you're weak and ineffectual. You will be completely demoralized and you will fail to act. In fact, we have the numbers now. I keep saying it. We have the numbers now, not a year from now, not 6 months from now, but now, to topple the entire regime. I'm not talking about the government. I'm just talking about, so the police will not enforce anything.
Right.
All this stuff will come to a standstill. Yeah, it's written on a piece of paper, but it will not be enforced, because when the actual numbers show up, it's just back like in the animal world, size, speed, strength, and numbers. If you have the numbers, then they will back down. They will realize they can't do anything. So, and history's shown, and this is the last point I'll make. If you don't allow them into your head, if you don't allow fear, doubt, fear,
Excellent
uncertainty, doubt,
tip.
anxiety, and confusion, you don't allow them to demoralize you. You don't allow them to get in your head. You don't allow them to somehow externalize your power. Do you think for 1 second that I'm putting all my faith in the courts? Yes,
No.
we are absolutely fighting in the courts, but we realize that's one front. And we're
Yeah.
not saying if we lose in the courts, we're dead. We are absolutely
No.
not saying that at
Multiple
all.
fronts,
It's
multiple
it's
ways.
all the
Yes.
fronts, and even if whatever happens, we are not going to give up. We will never give in.
Exactly.
And the final
No.
point is that there was a book written called Skin in the Game by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He is a mathematician. He wrote this book in 2018. There's one chapter in there called the dictatorship of the minority. And in there, it describes that you only need 3.5 to 4% of the population. Guess who voted in our lousy provincial election? They 3.5% of the people actually voted for alternative party. If those people are absolutely, and there's more, far more than that. But
Right.
let's say just 3.5, 4% of the people absolutely refuse to give in. They will not, they'll be completely recalcitrant, will not give an inch. And will say, sorry, we'd rather be dead than ever comply with these garbage, completely unconstitutional, unjust laws. And the police, a lot of police believe the same thing. Military believes the same thing.
Right.
They won't say anything. The doctors and lawyers believe the same thing, but they're silenced. And they have professional organizations. That's another big problem. But
Right.
the whole thing is, if we have the numbers now, if those people behind the scenes or publicly or privately, it really should be publicly, say, I'm sorry, you will have to put us in prison. You'll have to put us in camps, and you'll have to kill us because we're not going to go to those camps in the first place. We're not going on any rail cars. That's where my family went. They were all exterminated on my dad's side, except for a very small handful. They were exterminated.
Absolutely.
And they gave me a choice. They put a gun to their heads. You go on the rail car, or we'll pull the trigger. I'd say pull the trigger. I'm not going along with that ever. And if everyone had that attitude, this would end right away. We wouldn't have to wait for a court decision. We wouldn't have to wait for another election. We wouldn't have to wait for the media to broadcast anything. It would simply end the mass withdrawal of consent by only a small percentage of the population, by an absolutely recalcitrant part of the population, which will never give in, is the dictatorship of the minority. That's why we have all these trans rights and things like that, which are utterly insane and ridiculous. You have someone with a bullhorn at the street corner shouting at the top of their lungs about trans rights and things like that, and calling everyone transphobic, racist, misogynist, all of that sort of stuff. Well, guess what? If they are absolutely recalcitrant, they will get their way. People will have to bend to their will. We have more numbers than they do. They successfully changed the law in the world for the worse. We can change it for the better. We have the numbers now. All people need to do, as I said, show up, speak up, and open up, and say, I will not consent. I do not consent. I will not comply. I will not obey. I will never give in. If everyone said that and everyone meant it, this would end now.
Thanks.
That's my takeaway.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That was a powerful session. Thanks so much. And I'll get this posted. Have a great day. We'll be in touch again. Bye now.
For sure. Thank you. Bye-bye.